Welcome to the Lifeletics podcast, a brand dedicated to the growth of athletes as they transition to life after sports. My name is Megan Rutter, former D1 swimmer at Florida Atlantic University. My goal here is to make all athletes feel empowered to take on the sport of life.
I think one of the biggest ones from sport that I've uncovered is there's always someone that's going to outrun you or beat you out of your spot or take what's yours. It creates this hyper competition where I definitely am still working on that.
Before we get started, I encourage you to subscribe here and follow us on Instagram at Team Lifeletics for more information on how you can be involved in the Lifeletics community. Let's dive in. Welcome, Nikki. It is so good to have you on here, and I'm excited to hear your story. So you were in swimming, you got into coaching, and then this spark came on in your head where you were like, there's a whole nother side to this. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, thanks so much for having me. I know we were just chatting how fun it is to meet people over Instagram and connect in the DMs to be able to have conversations like this. I'm like, where do I start with my story? I was a collegiate swimmer, and then I went right into coaching. I coached at Johns Hopkins, then Penn, and then my last coaching job was at Michigan. And through those last two positions, I studied sports psychology. I also studied organizational dynamics and just thought a lot about how is culture impacting the individual? How do we motivate the individual? And while I was going through that, experienced just a lot of challenges being a woman in sport, seeing the pressure that these elite sport environments create. And I also felt myself really burning out and wanted to make a change for my life. So the first thing I decided was I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I was really into the development side of sport. That's why I had gotten into sport and just wanted to impact people and help them grow as individuals. So I found life coaching, which I loved. And when I first left my last coaching job at Michigan, I was really focused on women and confidence. And a lot of my first clients were in my network. They were athletes or former athletes. And I saw some of the common struggles that they had that had been impacted by sport, whether it was perfectionism or body image or constantly burning themselves out, overworking, people pleasing, not setting boundaries, all the things that I struggled with. And it just kind of was this transition into, okay, I'm going to really start speaking more about athletic culture and try to empower women to stand in their voice and to prioritize themselves and to not internalize the things that happen in sport and make themselves wrong for that.
This is amazing. You mentioned people pleasing being involved with sport. So I myself am quite a culprit of people pleasing, as I know I'm not alone. What is the correlation between sport and people pleasing?
Yeah. So I, number one, think that just living in a patriarchal society, we are really taught to value ourselves based off of our performances and outcomes and achievements. And in sport, we learn that even more. But I think women experience another level of it because for thousands of years, we've been kind of second-tier citizens, not good enough. So also then we feel the need to prove ourselves even more through outcomes. And people-pleasing can show up as that. If I do this for my coach, or if I do everything the right way, if I have the perfect body, if I behave, if I do it the right way, then I'm going to get that validation from my external environment, from my peers, from my parents. It's this is the path, follow the path. You're a good girl. Great job.
Yeah, be the angel in the family, basically.
Yeah. And it keeps so much self-suppression happens in that. And so I just think patriarchy, sport, society, it all goes hand in hand to create this nice little cocktail where, yeah, we're trying to like show up in a way that's performative so that other people won't reject us.
Interesting. So when we feel like we made somebody else happy, whether that mean you suppress yourself or not, we feel accomplished because they're happy and we made them happy.
Yeah, it's
Wow.
the dopamine reward lights up. I don't know if you've seen the experiment with the rat that's presses the dopamine lever again and again, and it stops eating, it stops drinking, it stops taking care of itself, all to get that dopamine hit. And I think the same thing happens in sport when we get so obsessed with goals and outcomes that we will literally stop setting boundaries or taking care of ourselves to get that reward.
So what is that, those boundaries and that balance? Because, there is an aspect of us that we are very goal oriented and we are like a lot of athletes are entrepreneurs, we're hustlers. And that part of us is partially a good thing. Although when we need to set boundaries and we need to take care of ourselves, it can be a dichotomy. What does balance look like for you? And then how do you see most of your clients finding balance in their life?
Yeah, such a good question. I think balance, number one, means coming back into our bodies. And most of my clients are very ambitious. So helping people believe that they can have emotions, they can have struggle. I was writing down all the emotions that I felt in the last 2 weeks, and it's like panic, overwhelm, despair, just all of the terrible things that you don't want to feel.
Yeah.
But the difference now is that I allow myself to be there. I allow myself to feel all of those things. And when I'm working with clients, helping them learn when you process that emotion and you actually make space for it, that can be physically, we have to move the energy through our body, but also mentally, like what are all the thought patterns that are creating those emotions and those stories that we get really stuck in.
Mm-hmm.
When we can process through that, we can move forward faster instead of carrying like all of this emotional gunk in our bodies through everything. And that's really what causes the burnout. And so I think coming back into alignment means checking in with our bodies. And I have a process where I teach women what their values are. And every week there's kind of a check-in. Okay, where was I in alignment with my values? Where was I out of alignment? And it's not going to be perfect, but it's kind of just a check-in every day. What do I need? Every week, what do I need? And that's how life actually happens. If we look at nature, nature has cycles. And so sometimes we need a little bit more rest. Sometimes we need a little bit more slowing down and self-care. Sometimes we're like, I feel great, let's go. And so it can shift I think our boundaries can shift from day to day.
Yeah. I think a lot of it has to do with self-awareness and being open to being real with yourself. Like, how are you feeling today? And again, being okay if that is a negative feeling. And you know what? I'm really not feeling motivated today. I'm really like, I didn't sleep well last night. This happened to me at work and I just am feeling crummy. And like, that's okay. Those type of days are needed in order to achieve the next level. So talk a little bit about our self-talk during days like that and how we can shift the narrative.
Yeah, I think number one, not making ourselves wrong for how we feel. And any feeling that you have initially is created by some thought that's happening. And it's kind of a cycle too, because then we have thoughts which create more feelings, and then our feelings create more thoughts. But we actually don't have control over that. And so if we're like having all of these thoughts, sometimes I have thoughts like, you suck, you're terrible, what are you doing? Your business is failing, like no one wants to work with you. And it's actually just like creating space for that and allowing that to happen. Like, okay, my brain's just trying to protect me from something right now. It's spinning out and noticing that. But then, like, sitting with those feelings in the body, whatever that story is creating, doesn't feel great when my brain's doing that. But then I think we can, after we process it, decide that we want to start to shift it. So I have to find evidence for what is working. How am I taking steps forward in my business? Like, what's the one thing that I need to do? Or what's the one thing I can do for myself today? It's like, I'm going to get up, I'm going to brush my teeth, I'm going to go for a walk outside, and then we're going to do what we need to do. So just creating space, I think we can be so overwhelmed by that it can just keep us stuck. I like to create like a belief plan, like 1 or 2 thoughts. You know, it's okay to have a human experience. And I think that means that we're going to experience struggle. Doesn't mean anything's wrong with us. One of my favorite ones is I can do hard things and be soft with myself. Yeah. So just like noticing some of those thoughts that will generate a different emotion. And it's also like understanding that it's not all or nothing, that we can experience 2 emotions at once. So I can feel defeated and despair and panicked about, threw my back out and I'm moving to Florida, but I'm also excited. I'm also invigorated. I'm also so grateful that I get to make the choice to live wherever I want to. And I'm following my dream of being by the beach. So you can have multiple emotions happening at one time.
Yeah. And recognizing both of those emotions in the moment is so important. And I love what you said about just writing things down. I was journaling this morning and I was thinking to myself, like, when these thoughts come in that are, I'm struggling, my business is failing. Imagine a friend telling you this. What advice would you tell your friend? How would you tell your friend that, like, you're doing amazing? Like, here are the things you have done. Like, let's focus on that. You would kind of try to reframe that for a friend. So we're so hard on ourselves, and we often don't do that to ourselves. Talking about bringing things up and being in this, like, embracing the suck type of thing. What does that look like when we want to tell people that we're struggling, but are worried about their reaction? Because we were talking about this on Instagram, where it's often like, are you okay? Like, is everything gonna, like, do you need anything? Like, as a panic of, like, as if I'm on my deathbed. Like, no, it's all right. And so how should that conversation look instead?
Yeah. Well, I think the first thing is to realize that when other people are freaking out, it sometimes is their own, I say, internalized patriarchy, especially when it's like women projecting that onto other women. And I've been doing a lot of this work for myself, especially with money beliefs, like becoming a CEO of a business. I realized like how I don't trust myself to invest because I've internalized some of like my mom's thoughts or society's thoughts that women aren't great with money. And then I was thinking about like every breakup that I've had, or every time I was interviewing for jobs and didn't get the job, my mom would always be like, oh my God, like, are you going to die alone? She's like, how are you going to have a man to fix your crooked teeth? I'm like,
oh my gosh.
Just now I can see how much of that I internalized. And it's like, I'm really going to be okay. But those were her own fears. So I think the first thing is just recognizing people are going to project their own fears. And sometimes when I share things on Instagram, I get that like, oh my gosh, I can see your pain. Are you okay? Which is a very different energy than, hey, I'm here for you. I know you're going through the suck, and I've totally been there. And if you need something, like, let me know how I can help. And I think on the other side of that, as a person who is struggling, to ask ourselves, what do we need from our friends, from our support system? And having a lot of other life coaching friends now is like the best thing ever. And just having someone where they understand kind of the emotional background of things. And so we'll just have conversations and they're like, hey, do you need a friend or do you need a coach right now? Like, do you want me to offer you some coaching thoughts? But that requires me to know, like, right now, I don't want to be coached on this. And sometimes that's like, if you're going to therapy, like, there are very triggering things where it would be a different approach than if you're working with a coach, where it's like, I'm going to be very direct with you. I'm going to ask you some questions like, why do you think you're doing that? What's that behavior about? Whereas if something's more triggering or recently traumatic, you might not want that approach. You might just need to be sat with in that pain and not move forward from that. So I think knowing what you need in the moment.
Yeah. And how about people who, they post that they're struggling, but they aren't aware of what they need in the moment, and they aren't aware of the different responses that they're going to get and how it's going to affect them? How can they try to decipher exactly what they need?
Yeah. I think it's always, again, like learning a little bit. Sometimes it's reflecting after the moment. Like I've even had coaching friends, we peer coach each other, and so we have a friend relationship, but also a coaching relationship. And sometimes they'll say things that are kind of triggering. And later, like reflecting back, I'm like, I'm really glad that they said that. Or sometimes it's like, I don't know that their response was actually helpful for me. And so just reflecting on how do I want to receive feedback, what's been helpful, what certain things help me. I think another thing that I really think about when it comes to sharing on social media is to try to process some of that offline, like do the journaling, do the reflecting, and then come and share it once you've done that work, and then ask for help, or ask to open up about it. It's like I think it was almost 2 years ago or 18 months ago when I went through a breakup. Like the day after the breakup, I was a mess. I wasn't going to show up online and talk about that. But now I would show up and talk about that because it's not as triggering for me.
Yeah. Well, and you've compartmentalized everything in your head to say, like, okay, this is why that happened. This is why that happened. This is where I'm going now. And I'm excited about my future. It's kind of rehaving that hope to say, like, there's a reason for everything. And even with, not getting a job, with losing a friendship, with whatever that may look like for you, leaving sports, or not making it pro or getting injured, whatever that is, you got to internalize it first and realize, just like you're saying, feel the feel. Like, feel what you're feeling, and those are all okay.
Yeah.
Normal.
Yeah, I think we can let people know, like, hey, I'm going through some stuff right now and I'm just processing it. And sometimes for me, just knowing like I have amazing support, I have amazing friends, gives me more, I guess, just space for myself. Like I'm good to go and process this. And I know that I have to. Like I have done this work long enough that I know that no one can heal my own pain. We can have coaches that hold space or therapists that hold space for us. But at the end of the day, we are responsible for everything that we're doing to help work through that. But just knowing that we are supported, and that can just be a feeling too. Sometimes I just have that reminder, like, I am supported. It's all going to work out for me. I trust. There's so much learning in every failure. I think that's something that, again, we're really afraid of, because really what we're afraid of is our emotions and our feelings. Like, that's the worst thing that can ever happen, is a feeling. And if we're not afraid of feelings because we trust ourselves to process that, then we can learn so much about those cycles that we go through and every failure that we have.
Yeah, that is so powerful. What you're saying right now is just being able to trust yourself to deal with those negative emotions and process them. Then you're not afraid to fail, because you know if you do, you got yourself. Like, you're going to be all right. You'll go back to journaling, you'll do your thing, and again, everything will be okay. Where do you find a lot of the athletes right now are struggling in their transition?
I work with people at all different stages. So I'd say some of my clients are in their late 30s or in their 40s. I have some clients that are still competing, either collegiately or on national teams or professional teams. But I feel like the underlying theme is just not really trusting their own intuition, being very out of alignment as athletes get into tons of masculine energy. And that's how we stay safe, is by constantly doing, and not being able to unhook from that. And that really is just not processing emotions, not being in the body. And so what that creates is like this chronic state where your brain's just trying to solve problems and, living from the neck up, basically. And it's like, even if you've done everything you need to do for the day, not feeling like that's ever enough or that they're good enough, and then not really standing up for themselves or setting boundaries, or, they'll be working, doing a million different things and not make a decision about what is really important to me, because they're trying to just bite off more than they can chew without being really clear about what's important, or just making decisions. I think we can all relate to like battling in our mind. Is this the right direction? Is that the right direction? And the truth is, there's never a perfect right answer. It's just whatever you decide. Love your reasons, and then you're going to learn, and then you get to do it again.
Yeah.
So those are some of the things, the perfectionism, the body image, the over exercising, or doing insane high intensity workouts all the time, which it's like, we're already stressed out enough. Like, you don't need to go to Orange Theory every single day. Go to yoga, do something, go for a walk, get out in nature. But yeah, all those sorts of things.
I one of my friends here, she was expressing to me that, this idea of working out and like having to do 2 hours of like hardcore exercise, or it didn't count. She's like, I'm getting up so early at like 4:30 to go to, this high intensity exercise, the HIIT class. And then she goes on like these long walks, like after, all before work. And then she likes to come home from work because she just sat all day, and go for another walk. And then she's finally eating dinner and then getting to sleep. And I'm like, we can slow down a little bit. Like, here we are in life after sports, and you have the ability to slow down. And like, nothing is going to change with your body or your worth. Like, you don't have to do all these things. And so I think slowly, it took her a little while, but to just take some rest.
Yeah, it really wreaks so much havoc on the body. And I think so many, even autoimmune, I always felt like when I was coaching that I had thyroid issues and I was exhausted and I was always in chronic pain. My muscles were so tight all the time. And here I am, especially when I first graduated, I'm like, I'm going to keep up the same workout routine. I would go to the spin class in the morning and then like body pump in the afternoon. I would like create a calendar of all my workouts. Yeah, but a lot of it came from fear that I was going to gain weight. And I think that's a message that you're given a lot, especially in swimming. Like the moment you stop swimming is the moment you're going to put on 30 pounds, and how terrible that is going to be for everybody.
For everybody, right?
Yeah, like it's embarrassing.
But the thing is that we go through those like ups and downs and all that stuff, and you find your feet and you go, like you were saying. How about exercising after sports? I mean, I personally, I didn't know what to do. I just would go for a 2 or 3 mile run and feel like I did my job. That's all I needed to do, and I left, but I wasn't enjoying it. How can we find that enjoyment in exercise again?
Yeah, I think just being willing to try different things, and I think tuning in as well to how does your body feel? Um, you know, sometimes I do believe in doing things that we don't want to do. Like you can really look at your values and say like, this is going to expand me. Maybe it's like I need to be more intentional about doing core work and certain lifting exercises to support my spine because I have a bad back. So like really thinking about your body and what's supportive for you. Pilates is another thing, and some yoga classes. So I do think it has to do with listening to your body, and you don't have to love every single workout that you're doing, but at least have an intention. Why are you doing what you're doing? And look at those thoughts that are driving, because if you're working out from a fear of I'm going to gain weight, or what happens if I don't keep up this intensity, I think a lot of athletes too have this idea that that intensity is healthy, or if I'm not working out 2 hours a day, that I'm no longer an athlete. And I think we get to shift what is actually healthy, like looking at our lifestyle. If we're working a job that's stressful and we're stressed all day and we have high levels of cortisol, you don't want to go to an Orange Theory class every day. That can actually cause weight gain because you're creating more cortisol. The body's holding on to more fat. And so I think, yeah, like sometimes for me, it's like I need to get out into nature. I need to go for a walk, and that feels really good. So just knowing your body, listening to your body, trusting what it needs, and not bulldozing through everything, understanding why you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah. The why is so important. And trusting yourself is so important, and trusting your body. I think that's not talked about enough. And that's a huge thing. You might understand and be aware of what you're feeling, but not actually act on giving yourself that rest. And because of that other thing that's going on in your mind, that's like, no, just keep going. Just keep going. Like if you rest, you're taking a step back, and that's not okay. It's actually the complete opposite.
Yeah. That's where the feeling thing comes in again, because you can, like, if you were my client and I was coaching you and you were afraid to do that, I'd say, okay, well, what feeling are you going to feel if you don't do that intense workout? And it would be, sometimes it's guilt. Like I'm going to feel guilty, or I'm going to feel not good enough. I'm going to feel incompetent. And that's where we go back to, the main conversation that started this podcast is like, are you willing to feel guilty? Are you willing to feel incompetent and see the thoughts that are driving and then realize they're just thoughts. You don't have to believe them, and you get to reframe what health means for you after sport. And not only reframe, but really sit with, what is health? Is the point of health to just have a perfect body? Whatever, we learn from the media and magazines and wearing a swimsuit all our life and having to have like the lean, fit, cut body. Usually that's not super healthy.
Yeah. I loved what you said. They're just thoughts. You don't have to believe them. Super powerful. Thousands and thousands of thoughts go through our head every single day. And we don't have to believe them. If somebody outside, a stranger, told you you're not good enough if you take a rest day, you'd be like, F you, dude. I am. But then you tell yourself that, and we believe it. It's so interesting to turn that both ways, to say, like, if somebody was to say this to me, there's no way I would believe it.
Yeah. I could just nerd out on this conversation, but I think that that's why it's so powerful to sit in our triggers, because like my coach always says, if someone were to tell you like, I really don't like your blue hair, I'd be like, okay, well, I don't have blue hair. But when people say things that we have as beliefs in our subconscious and that really triggers us, it's because there's something there that we do believe. So if someone's saying like that workout isn't good enough or your body is not good enough and it's really hurtful and triggering, it's actually great information to sit in those emotions and see, like, I believe that my body is not good enough, and I see that that's a thought that my brain is offering me. We have 60,000 thoughts a day, and a lot of it is conditioning. I also think that we have generationally thoughts passed on. There's studies that show like the trauma that's stored in the body from past generations. And so any trauma is almost like a feeling in the body, but it's also a thought pattern. And that's how the body is the mind. And so we have to actually sit with that, process it, release it, and then start rewiring some of those thought patterns, rewiring what we see as healthy. So a lot of the thoughts that we have, they're BS. They're not ours. Sometimes I'll like look at stuff that my brain's offering me. I'm like, where the heck did that come from? But we internalize so many messages from society, from sport. I think one of the biggest ones from sport that I've uncovered and see with my clients is like almost that there's always someone that's going to outrun you or beat you out of your spot or take what's yours. And I think because we are given the messaging that there's like less room for women to be successful, it creates this like hyper competition, where I definitely am still working on that, where it's like safe to actually have very supportive, empowering relationships with other women. But we've all been on teams where like we're backstabbed, or it's like we want our teammate to do bad so that we can win or feel better. And then that also creates that like constant hustle and grind that like someone's coming for your spot, baby. Don't slow down. Which is just silly because we all have unique values, perspectives, and impacts that we're able to offer in different ways. And the way that I do it is my way. The way that you do it is your way. And we can all like support each other and lift each other up and realize like there's enough room for all of us to be successful and to be happy with what we have.
It's so true. And with women specifically, like we are so mean to each other, and like, or we can be. and giving that space for, like you said, what you do is you. what I do is me. My personality is mine and yours is yours. And at the end of the day, the people that latch onto your personality are not going to be the same people that latch onto mine. And there are so many humans out there that need help with things like this. Like you said, there is so much room for all of us to be successful in a space where there's still so much need. And even in the health industry, you think of how many health coaches or fitness coaches there are, and think of how many unhealthy people we still have in this country. It's not saturated.
Yeah,
yet.
like every
industry is not
human.
saturated.
Every single human, like I believe everyone needs a coach.
Agreed.
I think everybody should just coaching has just changed my freaking life. So the way I think about myself, like if someone asked me to do a podcast 2 years ago, I'd be like, why do you want me on a podcast? Right. And it's like, meanwhile, I have like all these master's degrees and I've coached at the highest level, but I'm still walking around like no one wants to hear my voice. Now I'm like, I have something to say. And that's what coaching has done for me. But yeah, like there's so many athletes that need help unwinding all of this. And I know we're in a similar space, but your message is going to be slightly different than my message. And it's like my coach says like we all have our unique medicine and people are just drawn to work with the people that they vibe with, and that's okay. Sometimes it's like my friend was saying that she wants to hire this coach that's like very different than her, that thinks very differently than her because she wants that challenge where she's very like feminine and spiritual. And she was a yoga teacher and she's like, I want to work with this woman who's very like direct, organized, and like to the point, because that will challenge me to bring that side of me out. So, yeah.
You know what's interesting too is how we will enjoy our work more if we're supportive of other people. When we have this like, yeah, I want them to do that because then it'll make me feel better. That kind of mentality, it makes us sour. We're then doing the business to take other people down instead of lifting other people up. And I think in general, just supporting one another will help us in our own journey and how we show up.
Yeah, because we can go back to the thoughts and the feelings. And like, if you're first off, again, like noticing when we are comparing, and that is okay because of our conditioning, it's going to happen. So I will catch myself in that being like jealous, or, I'm 32 and it's like my friends are having babies and they're married. I'm like, I'm over here building a business. I got a dog. And it's like that can creep in. And then I'm just like, wait a minute. Like I get to live my dreams. I don't have to worry about a partner or having kids. And even some of my friends that have kids, they're like, this sucks, So we always like get into that comparison, and we can be in that negative energy, like someone else has something else. But then we're in that negative energy and it keeps us so stuck there. So just really coming back to the evidence of like, why is what I have great? And I like to see for other women that are building successful businesses, I'm in a mastermind with women that are making millions of dollars. And sometimes that's a lot of pressure, but it's like, actually, that's just what's available for me. And that's an example of what's possible. And so the more that I like live in that, the more we celebrate each other in that mastermind, it's like, holy shit, that's amazing. And then you feel that and you're like, okay, if she did that, then I can do that too. And it's all about the energy, because our thoughts and our feelings are what drive our actions and how we show up and how we interact with the world. And so if we don't process those emotions, then we stay in that. And then that's how we show up. Like, I have to do something to like pull this person down so that I can get ahead. It's just like not a great space to be in.
Yeah. Now, my coach, Nikki, if I was an athlete that was transitioning, what are 3 action items that you would give to me to make this transition a lot better?
Yeah. Okay. Number one, know your values. So I'd say do a values breakdown and really ask yourself, are these my values? Or are these things that other people have told me that I want? I think we can do so much with values. That's how I spend a lot of the first month around values, because that informs us of what we need and what we value. So knowing your values. And then you can brainstorm, if you just go to Google and you find a value sheet. I tend to work with 5, but there will be overlap. So making sure that they're balanced. And then I would say for each value, write it at the top of a page and think about what that means for your life. This is how we unattach from performance and outcomes, because whatever you choose to do next, you want to be doing what's important to you. And so, for example, one of my values is personal growth. And so I think about, what does that mean for my habits? What does that mean for my friends? What does that mean for my community? And really anything else that comes up. But for me, I need time to reflect. I love listening to podcasts. I love investing in myself. For my friends, I want to be surrounded by like-minded people. I like to be around people that expand me, that, if we were hanging out, I'm sure we'd be having these conversations. And for community, yeah, how do I create a community of that? That's why I'm moving to Florida, because there are a lot more entrepreneurs in Florida, and that's just something I'm excited to build that community in person. But yeah, really thinking about, what does each value mean for each part of your life, and let those inform your goals instead of, just what your mom or your dad or your peers go get a finance job or go to graduate school, really, so why you're doing what you're doing, and to make sure that you have some balance in your life. You just don't take that athlete mindset and it's now I got to put my head down and go straight into this. And then I think the third thing is do emotional check-ins. I always start the first week with working with clients. You can Google that as well, the emotion wheel, and check in 3 times a day. Just slow down and be 2 feet on the floor, take a couple deep breaths. It's where am I at right now? What am I feeling? We can create safety in the body by asking what's the sensation? How does it move? What's the texture? Is it buzzing? Is it fast? Is it slow? But that can tend to slow the analytic brain down. So if you're transitioning and you're just overwhelmed, holy crap, what do I do? Starting to come back into our emotions. I also recommend with the emotion thing to try breath work, because I think a lot of athletes struggle with jumping into meditation because we are so analytical that it's I can't even get my brain to slow down. You hear that all the time. Meditation doesn't work for me. So yeah, they can find that on YouTube, or Insight Timer is a great free app to use that has some just different coaches that have breathwork meditations. It's a great way to start coming back into your body and process some of the emotions that are coming up.
I love this. This is amazing. You gave so many valuable tips, so many just quick little insights to what it takes to really merge this transition with being very seamless. And starting early is the name of the game, right? The earlier we can prepare, the better off we'll be. So I want to thank you for everything that you're doing, and just the people that you're impacting and the word that you're spreading, because it, like you said, it is helping everybody that knows you and that follows you and that attaches to you. So thank you.
Yeah, and thank you as well. I know you're building your 2 businesses as well. So, you're making an impact in all the guests that you have on this podcast. It's very high tech. It's official.
Yeah. Thank you so much. How can people find you, support you best?
People can find me on Instagram. It's Nikki Kett Coaching. I'm also on the TikTok now, which is a whole other rabbit hole. Just
Go girl.
under my name, Nikki_Kett. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm hanging out these days.
I love it. And then you'll soon be hanging out in Florida, which will be a whole nother move and transition for you. So I'm excited for you.
Yeah.
Well, that's a wrap. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Lifeletics podcast. I invite you to leave any feedback in the review section so we can continue to better our content. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to hit the subscribe button for more. It helps us more than you know. See you next week.